What's going on, guys? Emerson Tapani here on behalf of Animal, and welcome to Bigger by the Dozen. I'm about to give you guys a rundown of my top 12 foods that I consider vital for optimal growth. When it comes to gaining size, we know that we need to have an adequate amount of protein, and I'd be remiss if I didn't include beef, red meat, as arguably one of the best sources of protein. Obviously, it's rich in iron, other minerals, B vitamins. Aside from what it looks like on paper, practically speaking, just over years of use, guys know that they put on size and strength really well when they're eating a bit more red meat, myself included. Most of the time, I won't eat red meat more than twice a day, but oftentimes at least once a day. The reason being because it sometimes is a little bit harder to digest. And this is a key thing I want to stress before we go any further. If I were anybody else kind of giving you their top 12 foods for size, I don't know, maybe you would see a Big Mac here, maybe you would see some lasagna there. Yes, we could select just foods that are just totally calorie laden. Problem becomes, all right, it's difficult to eat those foods day in and day out all day long. All right? You start to just feel terrible, and we need to get in a certain amount of protein. And if all you're eating is, like I said, just this super calorie dense stuff, what's going to happen is inevitably your calorie count is going to be really high, which is good. We need the calories, but you may not even end up getting a good amount of protein in. So what I like to do is kind of start with, yes, mildly calorie dense foods, consume plenty of them, and if we need to start stacking stuff on top of it, you can always do that. We want to have a good basis, all right? We don't want to just fill our diet with crap, things that are going to disrupt our digestive system, because ultimately when we're trying to gain size, we want efficiency. All right, we want food that we can eat. They say it's protein rich, it's high in good fatty acids, it's got enough carbs in it, and we want to eat a big meal, right? And then ideally, 2 hours from that point, put down another one of those big meals. If we put down a big meal and then we can't eat again for 4 or 5 hours because we're just so stuffed, it's probably not going to do you a whole lot of good. So you need to be eating consistently, and in order to do that, you need foods that are efficient, foods that digest well, and foods that don't upset your stomach. And the foods that I have here before me are foods that pretty much fit that bill, and that for most people will work quite well. So like I said, red meat once, twice a day. Now I have here, this is cod, all right? Just some white, low-fat, flaky fish. And a lot of people would say, well, fish is more of a dieting food. I'm gonna eat it when I'm trying to get lean. I eat it when I'm dieting for a competition too, but I also include it in the off season. Why? Again, going back to food efficiency, I can put down 10, sometimes 12 ounces of cooked fish, okay? Like nothing. I mean, that's got a lot of protein. So it's very efficient. It allows me to get in a greater total amount of food each day. So fish is actually one of my favorite protein sources, whether I'm dieting or bulking. Chicken, of course, chicken is, kind of the bodybuilding staple. Generally speaking, fairly cheap, decently palatable, and it's high in protein and low in fat. Don't get me wrong, going back to this, whether it's steak, fish, or chicken, I'm not selecting these based on their fat content, because fat we can always make up for with additional fat sources, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But chicken, definitely a good staple protein source. That's three foods, 3 protein sources. What I'm going to give you next is what I consider a protein source, but it's also a very rich fat source, and that's in the form of whole eggs. Just like red meat, whole eggs have been kind of a bodybuilding staple since the beginning, probably going back to the 40s, 50s. Guys figured out pretty quickly that they grow really well when they're consuming whole eggs. No, I'm not a proponent of egg whites, aside from the fact that I think they're disgusting and they digest terribly. You get such a better result eating a whole egg because those fats that are in the yolk, all that cholesterol and stuff, a lot of you guys out there, probably based on a lot of misinformation you've heard over the years, you've probably been told to be afraid of cholesterol. That's total crap. Cholesterol is technically a steroid hormone upon which testosterone and other sex hormones are built. So without adequate amounts of it in your system, you're not going to be quite so anabolic. Not to mention the fact that from a health perspective, the link between dietary consumption of cholesterol and blood levels of cholesterol and heart disease, any evidence of such a link has pretty much been shown to not even exist. Now that we've got protein covered, right? We've got beef, we've got fish, we've got chicken, and we've got whole eggs, right? Those are 4 key foods that take care of protein. And with the whole eggs, we're now starting to touch upon fats. So let's talk more now about fats, and let's move into that. Because if I was going to consider any one macronutrient most vital, it would be protein. But if I was going to pick which one would come next in the hierarchy, you know, of the 3 macros, proteins, carbs, and fats, I would put fats next. Yes, more important than carbohydrates, absolutely. One of my favorite fat sources is olive oil. I've also included here Udo's oil, which I use. Olive oil, obviously just being a straight monounsaturated fat source, high in omega-6s, but good omega-6s. Udo's oil is kind of a blend of flax and other oils designed to kind of create a better ratio of omega-3, 6, 9 fatty acids. We could go into the fact that, you know, pretty much all the omega-3s contained in this are ALA versus EPA DHA, and what that means and whether it's so efficient in the body as an omega-3 fatty acid, but we're not going to get into that. I do consider Udo's oil to be very, very good. But why oil, right? There's other fat sources out there. Why oil? Well, oil, it's so easy to take a couple tablespoons and add them to a meal, right? If you look at a tablespoon of oil, first of all, very small. And second of all, there's nothing to it, right? It's easy to digest. It digests like that. These are calories that would very easily be added to the diet, right? If we're looking to jack up our caloric intake, we could add these to our diet without taking up too much valuable real estate in our stomachs, which for a lot of guys, once you hit a certain point, there's going to be only so much food you can eat. You know, how much you can digest and assimilate becomes a limiting factor. Trust me, when I talk about food efficiency, this is something you guys are going to want to pay attention to because it will become relevant to you at a certain point. Getting your fats from good oils, right? Staying away from a lot of the crappy oils that you find at your supermarket, which are probably rancid and just, yes, for the sake of just putting on size, they will work just fine, but they're probably not very healthy for you, especially using them in large amounts, which we would be using them for to gain size. Another category, right? Let's talk nuts, right? Nuts, great fat source, very healthy. Peanuts in particular, though. I love almonds, I love walnuts, all those other, nuts. Peanuts, though, for whatever reason, they seem to put weight on you a little bit more. We were talking about eating peanut butter versus almond butter. For whatever reason, and this is not something I'm making up, peanut butter seems to help weight stick to you a little bit more. So don't shy away from peanut butter. Just make sure it's natural. You know, you don't want anything with any hydrogenated oils. Ideally, something that's just peanuts. This is what I've got on hand. Yes, it's natural, but it's this one has had a couple ingredients added to it. Ideally, your peanut butter is just peanuts, and that's it. Maybe salt. So we've got nuts. Another great fat source, avocados. You know, if we were to look at foods that are, you know, rich in vitamins, minerals, etc., avocados would be one of them. Also a very rich source of dietary fiber. Now, let's talk about fiber. That sounds like a great thing. Oh, fiber, yeah, that's good, that's healthy. Well, and yes, you do need a certain amount of fiber, absolutely. For some people, too much fiber wreaks havoc, right, in the form of gas, bloating, and actually worsens constipation for them. So to find out, you know, what kind of person you are, I would be conscious of the foods you're consuming, how much fiber they contain, and try to pay attention whether you feel better or worse when you're consuming more or less fiber. Now that we've covered the bases with, some great protein sources and some good fat sources, let's talk carbohydrates. Obviously, there's a long list of carbohydrates that we could come up with. You know, everything from rice, potatoes, pasta, oats, breads, all different grains, etc. My take on carbohydrates, again, looking at it through the lens of digestive efficiency, I prefer to stick to carbohydrates that are gluten-free. I don't care. I mean, I eat a couple bagels every morning for breakfast. I'm not against the consumption of gluten. Gluten has kind of gotten this terrible rap, and everybody now wants to avoid gluten. There's nothing wrong with wheat products, unless you're someone who is, has severe, GI problems or has celiac disease, and you have, real problems digesting gluten. For most people in moderation, it's fine, but we are bodybuilders and we consume almost nothing in moderation. And that's the point. When you're consuming foods consistently in a large volume throughout the day, every day, we need foods that digest optimally, which is why I do prefer to stick to gluten-free carbohydrates, because if we were eating something like pasta all day or breads, probably would start to feel pretty shitty. That's why, for me, rice and potato, those are, the next two foods on my list. Rice, I love because it's easy to make in advance. I use a rice cooker. I set it every night. It's ready for me in the morning, and I have it fresh every day. I love it. It's cheap. A big bag of rice costs almost nothing, and it goes well with everything. It's something I could dump, olive oil or Udo's oil into. So now it's serving as a vessel for my the fats that I add to my diet, and it digests incredibly well. I don't think anybody has a problem eating rice, meaning being allergic to it or whatever it is. Potatoes, next on my list, are also a tremendous carbohydrate source. Being a little bit different from rice in the fact that they're a vegetable, whereas rice is a grain, they're even probably a little bit more gentle on the digestive system. If you're someone who's really prone to constipation, rice could have the ability to bind you up a little bit, whereas potato doesn't do that. Potatoes, being a vegetable and being a root vegetable at that, are a bit more rich in minerals and some vitamins, and very, very high in potassium. Does it matter whether you eat sweet or white potatoes? No. I say eat whichever one, number one, appeals to you and you like eating, because if you don't like eating it and you're not able to eat enough of it, that's gonna be very limiting for you, but also whichever one digests well for you. Some people eat something like sweet potato and they get gassy or whatever, and they would rather be eating a white potato, but they don't because they've been told everything white is bad and they shouldn't eat white carbohydrates, which is bullshit. So if you like a white potato, eat a white potato. People will point to, well, white potato has a higher glycemic index than a sweet potato. Glycemic index is pretty much useless. If potato was our meal and we weren't eating anything else, maybe glycemic index would be more relevant. But by the time we start adding fats to the meal, adding proteins to the meal, glycemic index becomes almost totally irrelevant. Also, carbohydrates, bananas. Why did I include bananas? Well, bananas are something that, for whatever reason, again, almost like peanuts, are just great for putting weight on you. They're easy to eat. It's easy to throw in a couple extra bananas each day, especially if you use some kind of shakes. They're good in shakes. And also, not super expensive. They don't break the bank. I've got one last food on my list, and I put it last because it's something I'm not personally crazy about, and that's dairy, full fat dairy, right? I've got some full fat cottage cheese here. Now, I ate a lot of this, all right, when I was first starting out, trying to gain size, and it worked good, all right? Yes, you want all that extra fat and calories that you can get along with it. It's loaded with protein, not super, super expensive, and dairy, generally speaking, works pretty good for putting on size. However, at least for me, it wreaks just total havoc on my digestive system. And for a lot of people else out there, it does the same thing. And when we're trying to maximize digestive efficiency and consume enough of all the food we need, we don't want anything holding up the show. Dairy could do that. However, if you're someone out there and you do great with dairy, you eat it and you feel wonderful, and it doesn't cause any kind of distress, I highly recommend it. I would even say if you consume shakes, mix your shakes with milk. It's only going to give you extra calories, and keep in mind, dairy is a growth food. I mean, it was designed for a baby calf to promote rapid growth. So there is something anabolic about it. If you do well with dairy, do not shy away with it. Last category I got here, I've got a couple supplements, because in a daily nutritional strategy, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes you don't have access to food. Sometimes you're too rushed. You end up missing meals. And no matter how perfect this food is, which I agree, food is number one, food is the best, it doesn't do you any good if you're not taking it in. So if you have access to a good meal replacement, which we put out animal meal, I actually formulated it. I formulated it to be something that digests well. There's no artificial crap in it, and it's got really balanced macros, right? Per serving, you're gonna get 46 grams of protein, 48 grams of carbohydrates, and 14 grams of fat, all coming from natural, whole food-based sources. Like I said, get your food in, okay? But if it comes down to missing a meal or having a shake, yes, absolutely, have the shake. What I've got here is a couple, here's a carbohydrate powder, here's Gatorade. These are two things that I think are very, very important around, if nothing else, at least around the time of your training. And although they're not food, they are carbohydrates, right? I mean, rice is just a carbohydrate, potato, pretty much just a carbohydrate. So I'm looking at them as a macro to supplement my diet. You know, we're not talking vitamin mineral, but kind of more of a food type supplement. You could, however, add carbohydrate powder to meal replacements, things like that, if you're looking to just jack up numbers. So long as you've got the protein covered, which, you know, 46 grams of protein in one shot is very good, and you're looking to just, you know, beef up the calories, you know, beef up the carbohydrate numbers, having a good carbohydrate powder is a great way to do that. And like I said, it could be Gatorade. It doesn't have to be, you know, a specific carbohydrate powder, whereas something like this contains a lot of sucrose. Going another way, you know, that's a blend maybe of dextrose, of maltodextrin, is a little bit, at least in my opinion, a little bit more optimal. So now that we've gone through it all, let me give you guys a brief kind of recap, right? At the foundation of my nutritional strategy, and this is something I would urge you guys to consider, again, is the efficiency, right? The digestion of the foods that you select. Like I said, we could put all sorts of, you know, calorie-laden stuff in here, but for a lot of us, those are going to be foods that we're not going to be able to really consume, you know, 5-6 times a day in and day out, without having some kind of digestive repercussions. So we want foods that digest well. We don't want to just eat crap. When it comes to gaining size, we don't want to shy away from, you know, that bowl of pasta and meatballs, or, you know, the occasional pizza, or the burger and fries, right? But those are foods that we kind of throw on top of an already solid diet. Those aren't the basis of a good size gaining strategy. So be sure to select good foods that digest well for you. Make sure, at least, you know, I feel that we should start with good proteins. You know, here we've got red meat, we've got fish, chicken, whole eggs, cottage cheese. You know, again, if you're someone who does well with dairy, dairy can absolutely be your ally when it comes to, you know, gaining good size. Fats, right? Don't shy away from fats, right? Good. Here we've got a good oils, olive oil, Udo's oil. Here we've got, you know, nuts, peanuts, almonds, avocados. When it comes to carbohydrates, right? Although we don't need to entirely avoid gluten, we don't want to be eating necessarily bread or pasta all day, because we probably will start to feel it and regret it. So rice and potatoes are great, easily digesting carbohydrate sources. Bananas, also easy to digest, and for whatever reason, just seem to work really well for putting weight on people. And lastly, you know, when food is difficult to consume enough of it, you know, we do have supplements that food-like, in a way, right? A good meal replacement powder, like animal meal, is whole food based. It's all natural. There's no crap in it. It digests extremely well, and it's got great balanced macro profile, right? 46 grams of protein per serving, 48 grams of carbs, 14 grams of fat. Something like this, you know, if it comes down to missing a meal or having something like this, keeping stuff like this around so that you're making sure you're getting those calories in, and they're good calories, is really going to make a big difference. Same thing, you know, making sure around the time of your training to keep your carbohydrate levels high. That's going to help you tremendously in gaining size. You could buy a Gatorade at the gym, or you could opt for, you know, what I would say is probably a better option, you know, a good quality carbohydrate powder. I'm not here just to sell supplements, but these are things that are, you know, really, really helpful. So I want to make sure you guys consider them and know about them. These are things that I use. And that pretty much sums it up. I mean, if you're able to include these items in your diet in sufficient quantity on a daily basis, there's no way you're not going to get bigger, assuming, you know, you're doing your part in the gym. This has been Bigger by the Dozen. If you guys have any questions, make sure you comment below, and I'll be sure to see to them, and hopefully I get a chance to answer all your questions. And again, I hope you guys found this useful.